Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Welcome to another episode of Bump in the Road. The basic podcast is always free. We also have a premium subscription called Bump 2 that lets you listen in on extended behind-the-scenes conversations with our guests. Check it out at www.bumpintheroad.us. Mark Steven Porro is the author of A Cup of Tea on the Commode. It's a love story about caring for his mother in her last years. Mark's heart and sense of humor, his love and his care, paint a picture of what's possible in caring for another. Please welcome Mark to Bump in the Road. Mark, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
Well, at 55, I was living a lovely, carefree bachelor life in Los Angeles. I was acting there. I was living there at the time for close to 28 years. I was an actor, an entrepreneur, and having a good time. I had no wife, never married, no children. And then I get a call from my brother back in New Jersey that my mother just kind of shut down, and she was kind of on her deathbed. At least that's what it sounded like. So I flew in the next day, and she had 5 children or 6 children. All of us came in. And 2 lived locally, and she was, I called it like a semi-comatose state in her bed in the house that we all grew up in, and we were on death watch. And so that was quite an impact on my life. And then as I was there, because she seemed to be in no rush to die, we had a priest come in and give the last rites, and hospice was called. And usually, when they're called, the end is not a happy one. So my younger sister and I hung out with hospice a lot because we wanted to care for our mother, learn how to do it properly for as long as she was going to be here. And so we were really good students, and we, while we're on death watch, we were caring for her, changing her diapers, changing the bedding, and all that kind of stuff. And then a few weeks later, she kind of snapped out of it when a rogue hospice nurse broke the rules. The rules were no food, no medication, no drink. She's transitioning, let her go. And this nurse came in, saw my mother, and she's semi-comatose. Her eyes are closed. It appeared to be in no pain and stuff. And she said, "Are you hungry, Mrs. Porro?" And my mother's eyes shot open for the first time in weeks. And then this nurse accused us of starving our mother to death. And then you hear all these horror stories of maybe kids are doing that and stuff like that. So we obviously took offense to that. And then she called her supervisor, and her supervisor said, "Get out of there because you broke the rules." And now I'm thinking, is it possible that we are in fact starving our mother to death? Because at this point, it had been probably at least 3 weeks, no food, a little moisture, maybe some water on her lips, but that was it. And no desire for food from her. And so I went in and asked her, I said, "Mom, are you hungry?" And she said, "What do you got?" And those are the first words in weeks. And she says, "Well," I said, "anything you want." She says, "How about some pumpkin pie?" And I said, "Well, it's March at this point, not really pumpkin pie season, but my brother who lived locally took on the challenge, and he came back about 30 minutes later with 2 pumpkin pies. And they gave Mom her first spoonful, again, first food in weeks, and she spit it out. And I said, "Well, that didn't go so well." But we tried again, and she downed half the pie and seemed to wake up. And it was our mom. She was back, and it was great. And then the next day she polished off the second half. And then the next day, I think she polished off the full pie. And we said, well, this is not the best medicine, but it was working for her, and we didn't want to change a thing. So whatever she desired, she got. And so mom is now awake, and I started really looking around at the environment. And we had people that were in the house that were supposedly caring for her, really overseeing household duties and stuff like that. And I said, I think, I need to step in here because my mom deserved better. I loved my mother. We had a great relationship. And so I decided to move back into my childhood home and give up my carefree bachelor life and take on parenting for the first time. So that's it. Not so much of a nutshell, but yeah, so my life kind of changed at that moment.
Wow. How was it to be a parent?
Well, it was interesting. So my first question when I asked my mom if she wanted me to do this. Now, this took a few months. It wasn't instant. I was there for a few months hanging out with hospice, and then I went back to LA. And then I came back in September and took care of her for a few more weeks. And that's when I asked her if she wanted to have me come back and make sure this level of care was the norm. And she said yes. And I said, you understand that I'll do everything in my power to keep you healthy and safe? She said yes. And I said, now, if I do this, that means I am now in charge and you must obey me. And her mood changed in an instant, and she puckered up for a kiss. And I wasn't sure if that was a sign of surrender or one wishing me luck. So I gave her a kiss, and I hoped for the best. So that was the first shock of becoming a parent, because my first kid was a 90-year-old stubborn, guilt-tripping, funny lady, but she could be a piece of work. So, yeah. But it's interesting. So the decision was very easy because I felt I needed to rescue my mom, and so I decided to do that. Working out the logistics and whether I was qualified were other things that were in the back of my mind, and I felt I was pretty good at multitasking and good in any challenge that I usually took on. I studied and worked hard and committed to it. So I had no issue with that other than working out the things because, again, I lived in LA, so I had to work out the coast-to-coast thing. I still had a business there. And yeah, so, and then learning how to change diapers. Luckily, I learned a lot of that from hospice. Changing bedding while a helpless patient is lying in bed is not the easiest thing, but necessary. And you're seeing your mother naked for the first time. And for a son, that's a bit unusual. It's a bit unusual for a son to take over the 24/7 anyway, but you're seeing what age has done to her. And yeah, but what helped is, I was an actor and also a designer. So designer, you study human behavior and things like that. And as an actor, you assume roles. So I had to get over those awkward moments and say, listen, I am now the caregiver. So get over it and get on with it and assume the position of caregiver. So it's still your mother, and she's going to be a little slower. She's still a person who wants love and attention and to be protected and feel safe and trusted. And also I asked for permission quite a bit and stuff like that. So there were some adjustments, but I was brought up in a very nurturing home and learned good lessons from both of my parents and from my siblings. And it was really not a big deal. There's a lot of stress and stuff involved, but once you make that decision, all those other things, and the universe seemed to all support this decision of mine. And so I think overall it worked out very well. It was a really good experience for me, and my mom definitely spent her last few years, I think, the best they could possibly be. So that was very satisfying for me and satisfying to see her so happy with her life at that point and her the way she was being treated.
Was there any discussion of your other siblings being part of this caregiving?
Well, when my younger sister was there, anytime she came, she jumped in. Normally, the kids. I'm the fifth out of the six kids. There's three. I have two older brothers, two older sisters, and one younger sister. And my older brother was like the point man because he lived close by. So he took care of medication, hiring people that we needed before this incident happened to oversee the household duties and things like that. And then my older sister, when she would come in, she also lived in California. When she'd come in, she would help out quite a bit. And the two middle kids chose to be hands off. Which is okay. They weren't very comfortable doing any of that kind of stuff, which was fine. And I have a chapter in the book saying it's probably best because the fewer Porros in a room making decisions is best because we all have opinions. We're all from Jersey and we all grew up very independent. And so we all know the better way to do things and stuff like that. So friction usually ensues when there's more than one of us. But I happen to be the biggest. And so they were actually, they were good because they trusted me. I think they knew that I was going to be the right guy for this job. So they yielded pretty much to me in almost every aspect. So there really wasn't any friction as far as caring for mom, dealing with some of the other outside forces we had. We had some discussions and stuff about, but as far as caring for mom, no. And they also saw how well she was treated and how the big change and the way she looked and stuff like that. She was great. So I was very fortunate.
How was she intellectually and emotionally? Was she pretty present?
Yeah, she had a little bit of dementia. And then later on, we had a doctor who made house calls. Actually, okay, so when this all started, this started a couple of weeks after her 89th birthday in 2011. And so when I first got there, I think she knew who I was. But once I took over, she had a wicked sense of humor. And one of my goals also was to make her laugh once a day. And she made me laugh quite often. So both of my parents had really good senses of humor, and it was a joy to wake up or to grow up in that household. And all the siblings are all a bit nutty on their own. So, but one morning I went in, and I was giving her juice in the morning, and she said, "And now what is it I call you?" And I said, are you kidding? Because again, she had a wicked sense of humor. And she said, "No." I said, "Name your kids." And she said, "Laurel, Michael, Carol, David, Deasy." I said, "And?" And she had absolutely no clue. And I said, "Mark." And she says, Mark. Mark with a K? And I said, "Yes, with Mark with the K, your favorite son." And she says, "I don't have favorites." And I said, "Well, you have a favorite to forget." And so I fixed that by putting my name, Mark, in big block letters and taped it to the ceiling. So when I would greet her in the morning, usually she was lying in bed, so her eyes would easily go up to the ceiling. And I would say, "Good morning." And she'd say, "Good morning." And her eyes would shoot up to the ceiling for the reference and then say my name. And it was all good. And then after a while, she remembered who I was. So that was fine. Emotionally, my mother, she was an only child, and she had some tragedy early on in life. And I think those things tended to keep her emotions pretty close to her chest. I called it, she had an emotional brick wall, and I was able to break through it a few times in my life because I was a very curious kid, and I got both of my parents to open up about things that they didn't open up with the other kids. So I think she was very protected in that way. And that I don't think that changed, but she rarely, if ever, in her entire life, mentioned anything about pain. She had a very high pain threshold. She rarely complained about anything, even though I don't think she was very happy when this whole incident happened. It seemed like she was a prisoner in her own home, but she didn't really complain. And I think that I have a chapter in the book called A Silent Scream, and I think this was a silent scream. This was her way of complaining by shutting down and trying to die. And then later on, we had a doctor who came in and offered to do house calls, which was unusual because at that point she was pretty much med-free for 2 years, and I was caring for her and no doctor visits. She had a pacemaker, so we did over-the-phone pacemaker checkups, which were really convenient because getting her in and out of the house and all that stuff usually took a lot of work and probably did more harm than good. So it was good that we were able to keep her home. So this doctor came in and thought she had some Alzheimer's. So she said, I'd like to do some cognitive testing. And she did the tests. And at this point, my mom was 91, maybe 91 and a half. And I thought my mom did great with the testing. It was short-term memory, show the hands on the clock for various times, drawing backwards. And I thought she did great on everything except the short-term memory wasn't so good. So the doctor whispered to me, she says, no, I really think she's got some Alzheimer's. So I turned to my mom at that point and I said, Mom, you don't have Alzheimer's, do you? She says, I don't remember.
Was she kidding you?
No, I have no idea. But I just thought that I said that was priceless. It was a great line because she had some zingers. Once in a while, one morning she said, why do you treat me so well? I said, because you're my mom and you deserve to be treated like a queen. And then she burped. And I said, but queens don't do that. She says, how do you know? So she was very sharp in some ways, other ways, maybe not so sharp. But and there were some conversations that we had, and that's one of the things you'll learn with at least parenting an older person was there is some visions and dementia, and you've got to be patient with that. And I think in understanding and not judgmental or anything. And she would tell me things that she saw out the window and stuff. And I'd say, tell me some more, give me some details. And I said, well, I don't see them, but it's great that you're seeing them. And she goes, well, if you go outside, you will see them. And I said, okay, but I first have to get you some breakfast. And there were other times where we had arguments over who John Wayne was on the television. You're watching a John Wayne movie. And I said, did you like John Wayne? She goes, I love John Wayne, but that's not John Wayne. I said, that's John Wayne, Mom. We're watching a John. That's not John Wayne. So we'd have those things. So you have to, you roll with it, definitely. But if you can find the humor in it, some of those visions were delightful. Luckily, she didn't have any evil ones, I'd say. They're going to happen. So you have to be, I guess, open to it. And I always have to say that the biggest thing I learned, or the most important lesson, was empathy. You have to put yourself in their shoes, or as I say in my mom's case, it was her non-slip safety socks, because after this incident, she never wore shoes again, and she never walked again on her own. So, yeah, they're a little slower, but they still need love and understanding and patience, and I think that the dignity. Another things that I learned too, because I had a very interesting relationship with my mom. One of the first things I did, because and there's a fashion niche that has to be filled. She had these old drab day dresses and stuff like that, and I said, I don't want my mom looking like an old lady. So I bought her a new wardrobe. That was one of the first things I did. And that cheered her up immensely, which was great. And I created what I call a day of beauty. So I took out a Saturday, and normally I gave her full sponge baths day and night anyway. But on the weekends, I soaked her feet in Epsom salts. I washed her hair, blow dried it, and put it in a ponytail or braid it. Did her nails and gave her lipstick to match the red nails. And I call it a day of beauty because she used to treat herself. She worked full time for 30 years for the biggest newspaper in New Jersey. She was a proofreader for the Bergen Record. And to treat herself, she had 6 kids, a full-time job. She would go to the beauty parlor for a shampoo and a set and got her nails done. She had beautiful nails. And so I wanted to recreate that experience at home. And I didn't think that much of it. I just thought, wanting to feel pretty doesn't end at 90. And so the first day I did it, and after we finished up, she picked out her wardrobe, so I put the clothes on, stuck her in her wheelchair, and wheeled her in for breakfast. In our dining room, we had a big round mirror on the wall in between her bedroom and the kitchen. And the first day I did this thing, I parked her in front of that mirror, and she was just gaga. And I leaned in and I said, "Who's that pretty girl?" And she was beaming, and it was like, oh my gosh. I thought it was just like a small gesture, but the effect of this on her, and certainly on me and anybody who saw her, was absolutely amazing. And you say, okay, these things do not leave us as we get older. We still want hugs. We still want to be loved. We still want to feel pretty. And it was just amazing.
I think you bring up such an important point that as we get older in this society, in the States at least, you become so invisible. People think that, you hit whatever the age is, and what would you know? They discount 60 or 70 years of rich living and all the wisdom that comes with it. But as we get older, we have all the same feelings that we had when we were younger. We want to be included. We want to be listened to. We want to be heard. We want to feel pretty. Those things don't go away.
And what I found is difficult, one of our favorite things that we did, so I would get her ready every morning, a full sponge bath, and she would visit the commode. And then I would set her up at the edge of the bed and put on her new socks and stuff before transferring her to the wheelchair. I would always say, okay, and I would help her up, and I would support her while she stood up. And I said, okay, morning hug time. And we would hug. And these people who are bedridden or stuck in a wheelchair and stuff, that's rare to get a hug. It's awkward physically, but if you could make that happen, oh my God, she didn't want to let go, and I didn't want to let go, and it became one of our favorite things to do every morning. We did that, the morning hug. And those little things, the effect that they have is amazing, and it just makes you feel so good that you can give this to somebody. And what I got out of it was probably even more than what my mom got out of it. It's just it's very touching and humbling and a necessary thing that we, like you said, we seem to take them for granted or just absolutely forget about it.
How did you come up with the title of your book?
Well, nature sometimes took a little longer than we hoped on the commode. We had a commode bedside because it was too dangerous for her to get in and out of the normal bathroom with a walker or the wheelchair. Wouldn't actually fit through the door with the age of her house. So one day, to try to make it a little more pleasant, her favorite beverage was a hot cup of tea, skim milk, no sugar. And I offered it to her, and it was a hit. And so that became another morning staple, a cup of tea on the commode.
What advice would you give people facing a situation like yours? I mean, I think that it's such an extraordinary story in that your mother looked like she was going to die, and look what happened. She had several years of really wonderful, loving care with you. What would you tell people facing a similar situation?
Well, I would say jump. I have a philosophy, and some people may think it's corny or something, but I say find the joy in anything. I've had a pretty adventurous life, and I like to jump. And I say in the book, I'm very good at many things, but I never stuck with one because I got bored easy to excel, let's say, above all others. I'm really good at picking up stuff and going, okay, this is great. And then I go, now I'm bored, I'm going to move on. But I've always looked for the joy in it. while doing it also, but even in the failure, because you learn something from that. And I've started, I joked when I met my niece's father-in-law at their wedding, and we were chatting, and he said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I started 5 nonprofit companies." And he looked at me like I was Jesus. And I said, "None were intended to be." And then we had a good laugh and continued drinking. When I did this with my mom, there's, of course, a lot of stressful moments, because it's emotional, physical, mental stress, no matter what's going on. Because when you're not with her, you're wondering, is she breathing? Does she need anything? What am I going to be met with in the morning? Will she still be there? And things like that. So there's that stress is always there. But if you look for the positive in it and the joy in it, and during those stressful times, if you can make her smile or laugh, or she would pucker up for a kiss or something like that, it made it all worthwhile. So find the joy in it. If you're not comfortable doing the physical stuff, if you can at least supervise, because sometimes there are people who will take advantage of the situation, and a lot of the professionals do that as well, because it's a possibility for scams or whatever. But I would involve yourself wherever, as far as you are comfortable. And again, the empathy thing is a big deal. So you want to make sure your parent or your loved one is in an environment where they feel comfortable and safe, and certainly loved, whether you're there taking care of them 24/7 or not. If they know that you're, a phone call away, or if you happen to live close by, that is very helpful. But jump in, learn. I learned a lot from hospice, and I studied other things too, because I wanted to make my mom's house. I wanted to not only return dignity to her with the wardrobe and the day of beauty and caring for her, I also renovated her entire house while we were there. So I wanted the environment also to be, let's say, redignified. And she got a huge kick out of all that. Except one day she saw me going back and forth with all the 2x4s and stuff. And she says, "What's going on here?" And I said, "I'm renovating your house." And she said, "Who's paying for all that?" And I said, "You are. So cheer up. You may have to go back to work." And so we had a lot of fun. But whenever I was done with an area, the basement was the first. I took her, I carried her downstairs, and we sat and checked it out, and she loved it. And when I renovated the upstairs bathroom, I put a huge bathtub in there and gave her first bubble bath in years. Of course, I took a picture right before this happened, but and she was happy. It was a bubble bath, and it's a nice, fun shot, and she's grinning from ear to ear. And then she passed out, and I said, "Oh, great! I try to do a good thing, and I kill my mom." What happened was that she was in the hot water a little too long, and her blood pressure dropped, and so I pulled her out of there. At least she smelled good. And I put her to bed, and I called the nurse, and they said, "Yeah, she should be fine in a little bit." So I stayed with her. She woke up about 30 minutes later, forgot all about passing out, but she did remember the new bathroom. And there was another time I asked her, I wanted to involve her. That's another thing too. Involve them in things. I asked questions. I played games with her. And when I was doing the renovations, I would show her paint chips. And on this one particular day, I had carpet samples. So there were like 3x3-inch carpet samples. So I put 2 on her breakfast plate, and then went in to fill in her sippy cup with juice. And I came back, and she had one of the carpet samples in her mouth and a scowl on her face. And she said, "This is not a cookie." I know. I said, "I know, Mom, it's a carpet sample. Which tastes better?" And she picked well. So that's the color we went with.
If I could ask, how did her demise ultimately occur?
I guess just out of old age. She died at 92 and a half in her bed with me holding her hand. I say in the book, she seemed to be, she suffered from some depression over the years. And in July, she just kind of seemed to give up, similar to what she did 3.5 years earlier. But this time, her body and mind were all in sync. The previous time, it was not her time to go. This time, it seemed to all be working. So I described the entire death experience. It was 5 days, at least 5 days, pretty clearly in the book. Some people have said, my God, but I thought it was important, and I wanted to record that family history. And she had very little pain, and she died in her bed. She woke up a little bit, maybe the day before. I'm not sure now, because this was back in 2014. She did wake up, and she actually mouthed, "I love you," like a day before she passed. But all before that, her eyes were closed, and I just held her hand at night and stayed with her pretty much 24/7 for those last 5 or 6 days. And I guess a beautiful way to go. And when she finally took her last breath, all the stress and strain that, your body doesn't want to die. Your body fights it. And I went through this with my dad. Unfortunately, it was a shorter time period with my dad, but the body fights it. And even with my mom, there was the stress and strain on the face. And when she took her last breath, it just melted away.
Thank you for listening. I hope you'll support this podcast by becoming a Bump 2 subscriber. Buy us a cup of coffee. It's your support that makes this podcast and website possible. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life's path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life.